Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, entitled The Status Quo. Chapter 16, Jaya and Vijaya cursed by the sages. Text 28. Bhagavantam parikramya pranipatyanumanyacha pranipatyanumanya pratijagmu pramudita shamsanto Vaishnavim Shriyam. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Translation. The sages circumambulated the Supreme Lord, offered their obeisances and returned, extremely delighted at learning of the divine opulences of the Vaishnava. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. It is still a respectful practice to circumambulate the Lord in Hindu temples. Especially in Vaishnava temples, there is an arrangement for people to offer their respects to the deity and circumambulate the temple at least 3 times. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport. So this is a very interesting chapter, which is revealing so many secrets about the truth of the Supreme Lord, His devotees, His devotional service. All these secrets are being revealed in this chapter. This is the special thing about the Bhagavatam. How Bhagavatam is a exclusive literature can be appreciated when we consider these particular aspects. The chapter title itself is revealing a big secret. Jaya and Vijaya cursed by the sages. Jaya and Vijaya are devotees. They are in the spiritual world. So how is it possible that they can get cursed by somebody? Some sages, some brahmanas. Then the particular talks between the sages and the Supreme Lord, Lord Vishnu. The Lord speaking to these sages, glorifying the position of the brahmanas. And what kind of brahmanas? Particularly those brahmanas who are Vaishnavas. Because anyone who knows what is Brahman is a Brahmana. Brahman janati iti Brahmana. But understanding of the absolute truth as Brahman is the beginning of the understanding of the absolute truth. The higher understanding of the absolute truth as Paramatma and Bhagavan, that is also there. So a Brahmana who knows the absolute truth as Brahman is actually having preliminary knowledge of the absolute truth. One who knows the absolute truth as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavan, knows the absolute truth the best in the highest aspect. So that is the difference between a Brahmana and a Vaishnava. Brahmana, when it is used in the sense that he knows the absolute truth, it means that he knows the absolute truth in the feature of the Absolute Truth as Brahman. So, the glories of the Supreme Absolute Truth in terms of knowledge of what is Brahman is what the Brahmanas appreciate. And that is what is more or less elaborately explained in the Upanishads. The glories of Brahman, Brahma Vidya, Brahma Jnana. But there are much greater glories of the Absolute Truth when one is fortunate enough to know or hear about the glories of the Absolute Truth as the personality of Godhead, Bhagavan. Much greater glories. That is what these Kumaras are experiencing. The Kumaras, before they try to enter the YKunta planet, they were already having knowledge of the glories of Brahman. They were already Brahman realized. That's why they are being described as Brahmanas. Brahmana doesn't mean caste Brahmana. Somebody who is having knowledge of some rituals. No. Here Brahmana is specifically used in the sense of having knowledge of Brahman. But when they saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, immediately by the mercy of the Supreme Lord Himself, His mercy, when the Lord gives darshan, it is His mercy. We may go to some temple of the Supreme Lord, may visit there. But we should always remember that if we get darshan of the deity, then it is the special mercy of the Lord who has appeared in that form to give darshan, to give mercy. Of course, in our conditioned state, the mercy is limited to the Lord giving darshan. That we can perceive in the beginning. Whereas in the case of the Kumaras, they were more fortunate. The Lord spoke to them. The Lord personally spoke to them. Now consider the position of the Kumaras. That they know the Absolute Truth as a Supreme Brahman. But that Supreme Brahman, who is not having any material form, that Supreme Brahman has a spiritual, transcendental, wonderful, beautiful form. That revelation, when it happened to the Kumaras, then they were struck with wonder. The Absolute Truth has got a beautiful form which is completely transcendental to all matter, transcendental to all material forms. So when they saw, it was a feast for their eyes, it was a festival for their eyes. It is described in this earlier part of this chapter. We read those portions. So then, next, the Lord is speaking. Very, very pleasing to the ears. When the Lord started speaking. The senses of a transcendentalist are restrained from seeing material forms, from hearing material sound vibrations, in order to actually restrict the senses for what? For actually turning the attention away from all material forms and material objects to something beyond matter, to transcendence. But here is an instance of somebody who has perfected sense control, directed their attention towards the transcendence as Brahman, and completely absorbed in that transcendence. Such persons, such realized transcendentalists, are now seeing with their eyes something totally different. The transcendental form of the Supreme Brahman, Supreme Absolute Truth. They are hearing the words emanating from the Supreme Brahman. Otherwise, these transcendentalists who have no knowledge, who have no realization, no experience of the Supreme Brahman as the personality of Godhead, they just restrict their hearing, if at all they hear, to sound vibrations which actually describe the absolute truth, the sound of the Vedas. Which portion of the Vedas? Those portions of the Vedas which describe the Supreme Absolute Truth, the Supreme Brahman. But here they are hearing the words spoken by the Lord in His personal form. And because they are free from all material contamination, immediately they are able to realize the personal feature of the absolute truth when it was revealed to them. So we should remember that just like the Kumaras had immediate realization of the personal feature of the absolute truth, we are given the same opportunity when we go to a temple of the Supreme Lord, where the Lord is giving the same darshan He is giving of His transcendental form. We are getting the same opportunity like the Kumaras had when the Lord spoke. The sound vibrations emanating from the Lord when they entered the ears of the Kumaras, it was a festival for their ears. They experienced a special thrill running through their body. They experienced ecstasy. The same experience awaits us when we hear the Hare Krishna mantra. The same experience. It's no different. But we should note there is a difference in hearing. The Kumaras, the way they heard, and the way we hear the Hare Krishna mantra. We may not be as purified as the Kumaras. We may not be as pure in our heart, in our hearing, in our seeing. So therefore, the process of sadhana bhakti, it is acknowledged that we are not pure. Therefore, in the beginning, our seeing the deity, our hearing the Hare Krishna mantra or the Srimad Bhagavatam is not pure. Therefore, we should apply this process sadhana bhakti for the purification of the senses. for the purification of our heart. And patiently wait for that day when by purified senses we are able to see the Supreme Lord. We are able to hear the transcendental vibration of His holy name. We should await patiently while sincerely executing the process of sadhana bhakti. You see, the Kumaras, they have executed severe austerities for millions of years. As soon as they were born, even when they were small boys, 5 years old, they realized the importance of cultivating spiritual knowledge. So they decided that they will keep their body like small children. This was their mystic opulence, mystic power that they had, and they utilized it. That we will keep our body like small children, Kumara. Kumara means 5 years old. And yet, they are the oldest, among the oldest persons in this universe. They are the most learned. They underwent severe austerities for cultivating knowledge of the absolute truth. And they became realized, Brahman realized souls. But they did not have knowledge of the personality of Godhead till they happened to try to enter the YKunta planet. You see, they are having knowledge of the YKunta planet. That's how they are able to go there. But they do not know the glories of YKunta, the glories of Vishnu, the glories of Vaishnavas, they do not know. So, this knowledge is very confidential. Knowledge of Vishnu, knowledge of Vaikunta, knowledge of the Vaishnavas is most confidential knowledge, even beyond the understanding of the glories of Brahman. It is beyond that. Now they are learning, first of all, they are learning of the glories of Vaikunta. What is Vaikunta like? It is completely transcendental, but it is variety in the manifestation of the Brahman. Brahman manifestation, as known to the impersonalists, is only something transcendental beyond matter, which is of the quality of being eternal, Sat. Sat feature. Now when somebody is able to realize this, what is this Vaikunta? Sat means also existence. So this existential aspect of the absolute truth in the form of this Vaikunta planet, if somebody is able to penetrate that, because everybody cannot go to Vaikunta. Even the Brahman realized souls cannot go beyond the spiritual sky. They cannot go beyond the spiritual sky. It's only the mercy of the Lord that the Kumaras were permitted to go beyond the Vaikunta, beyond the spiritual sky, and enter into the Vaikunta planet. Even come to the gate of the Vaikunta planet, that is the mercy of the Lord. It's the Lord's causeless mercy upon them. And when they saw the glories of Vaikunta planet, oh, this is something beyond, more than the glories of Brahman, the variety of the Brahman manifestation, the opulence of Brahman manifestation. Then, one by one, they are getting to know the glories one after another. One wonder is the glory of the YKunta itself, the manifestation. Next is the glory of the Supreme Lord, the personal feature of the Absolute Truth. Even greater wonder, they were struck with even greater wonder when they saw the personality of God. And when they heard Him, even greater wonder than the personality of Godhead is the glory of the Vaishnava. From His own mouth, the Supreme Lord glorified the position of the Vaishnava. So they learnt about the glories of YKunta, the glories of the Lord of YKunta, the Supreme Lord, the personality of Godhead, and they learnt about the glories of the Vaishnava. So particularly here, Brahma is mentioning that they returned extremely delighted at learning of the divine opulences of the Vaishnava. How did they know of the divine opulence of the Vaishnava? The Lord is glorifying the Vaishnavas from His own mouth. What is the position of a Vaishnava? How much dear the Vaishnavas are to the Supreme Lord. How much dear they are to the Supreme Lord. And how much reverence and respect the Lord has for the Vaishnavas. If Lord Himself is so much to be revered, how much more one has to actually respect the Vaishnava. That we can understand from this conversation between the Kumaras and the Supreme Lord. So learning of the glories of the Vaishnava, they became extremely delighted. See, it is a source of a kind of transcendental bliss, hearing the glories of the Vaishnavas. What does it do? It awakens our natural devotion to Krishna, our own devotion to Krishna, to the Supreme Lord. See, we have that potency. We are potentially Sat, Chit, Ananda. So, our own existence as situated eternally in our position as the servant of Krishna, our original position, our eternal position, our natural constitutional position. Then the revelation of the knowledge of our actual self in relationship with the Supreme Lord, and the bliss, the ananda of the bliss in that can be experienced in that relationship, in that exchange of love by acting in our constitutional position. All the three become revealed to a devotee who executes devotional service. So the Kumaras are having this special realization beyond Brahman realization. The realization of the Sat feature of the Absolute Truth in the form of YKunta planet, the variety in Brahman. This is the personal aspect. This is the devotional aspect of the Sat feature of the Absolute Truth. Devotional aspect. Because the impersonal aspect is knowledge of the Absolute Truth as Brahman without any variety. Variety-less Brahman. That's all the descriptions in the Upanishads. Most of the descriptions. Not all. Most of the descriptions. But some confidential portions of the Upanishads, and more directly in the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhagavatam, the personal aspect of the Sat feature of the Absolute Truth. And then the Chit feature, knowledge of the personality of Godhead, knowledge of the devotees of the Supreme Lord, knowledge of their relationship. When that is realized, then the Ananda, the bliss to be experienced, simply by seeing the YKunta planet, simply by seeing the Supreme Lord, simply by hearing Him speak, so much bliss they experienced. This is devotional happiness. This is devotional happiness. This is beyond the happiness of liberation from material entanglement. The happiness of liberation. This is beyond the happiness of Brahman realization, Brahmananda. This is much, much greater, millions and billions and trillions of times greater than the bliss of Brahmananda. And this bliss the Kumaras are experiencing. This bliss they are experiencing. Therefore it is said, extremely delighted, pramuditaha. Muditaha means delighted. Pramuditaha means extremely delighted. Extremely delighted. Beyond their experience of Brahmananda. And they are also delighted at hearing, learning the divine opulence of the Vaishnava. What is the glory of the Vaishnava? Hearing the glories of the Vaishnava. That has given them even more greater happiness. So, in spiritual bliss, in spiritual knowledge of the personal feature of the Absolute Truth, in realizing the spiritual existence, the existential feature of the Absolute Truth in the personal domain, there is so much of variety. And that variety, one learns, is unlimited. There is no end to the knowledge of the variety of Brahman in the personal manifestation. The variety in Vaikuntha Loka, the existential feature. The variety of knowledge about the glories of the Supreme Lord and His devotees and their relationship. And the variety of transcendental bliss in these personal dealings. So that variety, the Kumaras got a small sample. Just a small sample, that's all. In its short interaction, very, very small interaction. It is too much for them to comprehend actually. Actually they are completely bewildered. They themselves state that in a previous verse we read. They're completely bewildered. What is this? This bewilderment actually awaits all of us. Because we are bewildered by the exhibition of the opulence of the Lord's inferior energy in this material world. We are all bewildered. The exhibition of the opulence of the Lord in His inferior energy. But greater bewilderment awaits us when the glory of the variety of the internal potency of the Lord is revealed. And that is the superior energy of the Lord. So therefore, Krishna very carefully in the Bhagavad Gita, He gradually unfolds the glory about His energy, inferior energy first, then the superior energy, then greater than the energies is the glory of the personality himself, the source of both the energies. So all those three are here in this chapter. The glory of the inferior energy, the glory of the superior energy, and the glory of the Lord himself, the source of both. So these glories actually are to be appreciated by us through this process of devotional service. And it is possible to completely get captivated by these glories if at all we carefully here apply the process of this sadhana bhakti. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.